Hello. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can very easily and inexpensively make this supporting side table to help you the next time you're out either camping or overlanding and you just need a place to set some of your things.
All right, so before we get started building it, let's talk about a little bit what goes into making it. So I picked up for the supports this nylon blend paracord, and it's rot and mildew and wet resistant, so it works out really good for the outdoor use. I picked this up at Home Depot. It was like $5 for 50 feet of it. The boards themselves, you can see I've got one of these here, is made out of cedar, and then I just got a piece of weather stripping that goes on the end of it that's going to go up against the vehicle to protect the paint from your vehicle, and also kind of helps hold it in place. And the ends are just, I picked up a pack of replacement ends for bungee cords, essentially. I got those at my local hardware store. It was $5 for 8 of them, I think, somewhere around there. So the whole thing is pretty cheap. And then this right here is a piece of fence picket, cedar fence picket that I picked up from Home Depot. And this is 5/8 inch in thick and 3.5 inches wide. This was like $2.57 per board. So for the one that I'm going to make today, I'm going to glue up 3 boards together, and I'm going to end up with a tabletop that's just a little over 23 or just a little under 23 inches. So I've gone ahead and marked out my marks at rough cut at 23 inches. I'm going to cut them on my on my saw, and then I'm going to join one edge of all 3 of them, and then run it through the table saw so I get 2 edges parallel to each other, and then glue them up. And when I'm all done, what I like to do is plane this down. Since I do have a planer, I'll run it through and plane it down to 1/2 inch. But you wouldn't need to do that. If you don't have a planer, you could just sand it, to whatever you were happy with. For me, for the amount of weight and stuff I'm putting on, it's really just to hold cutting boards, drinks, so on and so forth. Nothing really heavy, so 1/2 inch is plenty strong for what I'm going to put on mine. But if you want to leave it at 5/8, you can do that too. Okay, let's get started. All right, we've gone ahead and joined it. We've rough cut these down to size, a little over 23 inches. And then we've joined in one edge, and I've put a witness mark on it. I like to put a witness mark so I know which end is the joint later on. And I've got the table saw set up, and I'm only going to take out just a tiny amount, just basically the blade width, so that these 2 edges will be parallel to one another, which then we can glue it all up together. And then once we're all done, we'll cut it to the final width using the panel saw. All right, for the glue, I'm using the Titebond Ultimate. It is a waterproof glue. And I only need to really put glue on one side. A pretty decent amount. Just so it covers the entire surface. And that will be perfect. Press down, make sure that they're flat. Again, I am going to run them through the joiner. So, but since they're 5/8 and I want them 1/2 inch, I've only got about 1/8 of an inch to play with. This wood I've found is not uniform 5/8 of an inch either. It kind of varies. That's why I do like to plane it down if you can. If you want a really, really nice surface in the end, that's what you got to do. But at $2, a little over $2 a board, it's pretty cheap. You can make a set of these for, $20. You can make yourself 2 or 3 tables that are really, really useful when you're out in the field. Okay. So decent pressure, not too much. You don't want to squeeze all the glue out, but you want to hold it together. So this stuff, I'm going to leave them sit in the clamps for an hour, and then we'll move on to the next steps. I guess while they're cooking, I'm going to talk a little bit about the graphics here. I'll show you how I did these. This literally was I just used my inkjet printer, and I don't have a high quality printer or anything, so they turned out pretty decent. I'll walk you through the steps. The way I do it is really easy. I have no idea how long they're going to last, to be honest with you, but they've lasted so far. And I have wiped down the table a number of times, so. But you don't have to do that either. Obviously, that's just a fun component if you want to do it, make it look a little different. You don't even have to finish them if you don't want to. The cedar will last either way. It'll just kind of gray over time if you want to do anything with it. I kind of like the wood tone though. I like the stain and the look of this, so this is how I like to do my boards. All right, so what I did after it was done being glued up, I took it out of the clamps and I ran it through my planer and I planed it down to a 1/2 inch. And then I used my panel jig here and I trimmed up the edges to make it nice and square. And then I sanded it down. I started at 100 grit and went 100, 150, and 220. On the top and on the bottom I just did 100 grit because this is just going to get clear coat polyurethane. I'm not going to put any stain on it and no graphics on that side. So the key for the graphics is you want this as smooth as can be. So that's 220 works really well. And then I go ahead and clean it up really good. I use vacuum it off, and then I use a cloth and I wipe it all off and I get all of the sawdust off of it so the surface is nice and clean. And then I use this address label and I peel all the address labels off and I end up with the waxy side here. And on my printer, this is just a cheap inkjet printer. My printer prints on the bottom, so this would go in upside down, just like this. I use some tape to help hold it in place, and then I just use this to even pressure and transfer it onto the wood. Let's see if I can grab this. So for the graphic, I'm gonna just take a picture. I took a picture of my Jeep that I uploaded. This was when we got off a Broken Arrow trail, airing up, my son and my daughter and I. And then I just made it look like it was a painting just through one of the settings. That worked fine. But the key here is, since it has a word Mojave on it, what you got to do is you want to rotate it so that otherwise it'll come, when you print it and transfer it, it'll be backwards. So in this case, I want to rotate it horizontally. So when I put it onto the wood, it'll be in the right orientation. And I'm printing this in landscape mode because it's a wider image. And I'll just go ahead and print that off. Okay, this just came off the printer. You'll see it looks, well, it looks really dull, but that's okay. So now I want to take some tape. Lay it down. Put this over it. And then you just try to position it. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to try to center it as best I can. Put the tape on there. And now I go ahead and use this in a bunch of different directions to transfer the ink. And that worked pretty well. You'll see the word Mojave is in the right orientation now, the way I wanted it. At this point, if you weren't going to stain it or anything else, you'd want to use spray on polyurethane or lacquer. I think lacquer probably would work better, just to seal the image before you took a brush and put on the rest of the polyurethane or whatever finish you wanted to put on it. In my case, because I am going to stain it, I'm going to go ahead and stain the edges and kind of blend it in a little bit. And then after that, I'll spray the poly over the image, and then I'll put the wipe on. If you try to wipe it on or use a brush to wipe it on, you'll end up smearing the ink, and it'll run all over, and you'll lose some of the clarity on your picture. So that's why you want to seal it first with either a lacquer or a polyurethane. Okay, so I'm using this, this is General Black Cherry, matches the color of the other wood that I used. Stuff I had from other projects. Go ahead and give that a little stir. And I'm gonna use a foam brush to apply it, blending in the edges a little bit. I'll leave it on for a couple minutes and then wipe off the excess. And once that's fully dry, I come back tomorrow morning and then I'll start putting the polyurethane on. And after that's all done, we'll drill the holes and put on the rest of the hardware to hang it from. So we are almost finished. So as far as the time lapse goes, I don't even have an hour into this so far. I did take a break while it was gluing up. Just kind of dabbing the edges to kind of start with that and blend it in. Make it look a little bit rusted. That's kind of the whole idea of this for me, is I just remember going camping when I was a kid with my dad. And it was all this old vintage equipment that they had. And I always loved the old safaris when I was a kid. any movie that was filmed in Africa or Australia or something. I pretty much watched it because I thought that stuff was really, really cool. And so doing kind of vintage prints on top of my equipment that I use brings back some of that. And the nice thing I think for this kind of project, it's easy to do. You don't have to be real exact. You know, if you don't have a ton of equipment, you can still do it and make it it's still going to be functional as long as the surface is fairly level and you're able to tie the hardware on correctly. I think you'll find it'll be really, really useful out in the field. Plus for me, for the most part, I would rather, you know, make something on my own if I can, if it makes sense to do it. Some things it just makes more sense to buy, but for the most part, it makes the experience funner, something to talk about, and share it with your kids. Teach your son or daughter how to do it. So we don't need to put anything on the back edge. That's going to get the adhesive. It's going to have the weather stripping glued to it. So I'll just do the sides and the front. You kind of notice with stain, doesn't always soak in at the same rate. Some parts of the wood will soak in more. So I kind of keep flooding it on for a few minutes anyways. So I'm ready to wipe it off to give it an even colorization. So for the next step, I'm going to use paper towel. Usually I use a rag, but I don't have any other shop rags right now. This will also work. I'm just going to go ahead and strip off the excess. Now when you put on the polyurethane, that image will really pop and it'll really turn out, I think, really nice. Nice and clear like some of these other ones I have over here. So at this point it's good. I'm going to just let it dry overnight and then I'll start applying polyurethane tomorrow. If you wanted it darker, after it dried, you go ahead and do that same process again. Darken the wood till you get the texture that you want or the tone that you're looking for. You could also apply like a gel or something over the top of that if you really wanted to. But for what these are going to be used for, this is going to work out really well. All right, I will see you in the morning. Well, good morning. It's the next day. So I did come back last night after everything was dry, and I sprayed the image with this satin polyurethane just to seal the image like we talked about. I did it in this direction and then in this direction, and then I let it dry. I didn't film it because it took all of like 15 seconds. So now what I'm going to do is, before I put 2 coats of this Rust-Oleum thick polyurethane, which I really like this stuff because it goes on pretty thick, it levels out really nice, and it dries in like anywhere between 1 and 2 hours depending on the temperature and humidity. But I can put several coats of a finish on in a day, and I usually only need about 2 coats of it. Unless it's a tabletop, then I put 3 of these on. I don't know if it's quite 3 times as thick, but to me it's somewhere between equivalent to 4 and 5 coats of regular polyurethane. So I use it on a lot of projects. It's not, it's not a Varathane. It's not necessarily an outdoor finish, but I don't let these things sit out overnight. They stay in my truck bed drawer system, and then take them out when I need them and put them away. But I wipe them off with a wet rag and stuff so they can handle some moisture. It's just it's not intended to let sit out, overnight all the time. So the other thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to use an old grocery bag, a piece I tore off of, and just lightly sand that. This is kind of I like to use this on the final coat usually of a product. It's better than steel wool. It's equivalent to about 1,000 grit sandpaper, and it doesn't scuff up the image or anything, but it just does take off some of the nubs and makes it really smooth. It doesn't take a lot. You can feel where the high spots are. And there you go. And I will do that in between coats. Now I just gotta wipe this off quick. It's some interesting stuff. I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of a milky color. But when it dries clear. You can put it on thick and spread it out, and like I said, it levels out really nice. And I've used it on a lot of different furniture types that I've made. But the only thing I don't do it on is if I want a really fine finish, then I'll set up my sprayer and I'll spray a lacquer on something. If I know it's, you know, like an end table or something that's not going to get a lot of use on it. But for most projects, this works really, really well. And it's easy to apply. So after I've covered the surface with it, I'll do the edges. Again, I don't need to do the back side because that's going to get the weather stripping on it. But I will put one coat on the bottom just to seal the wood all together and help prevent it from warping a little bit. All right, then what I do with the last, I just kind of tip it off, go all the way down the piece at an angle. And that makes lines all the brush marks up going in the same direction. And this helps it when it levels off. And when you're done, you pretty much won't see any brush marks. And that's it. Now, all right, so I came back, I put 2 coats of varnish on here, 1 coat on the bottom. And I think it turned out really, really nice. You can see, considering it was done very cheap and very easily, just using an inkjet printer. So it's good enough for me. The next phase then is to attach the components and hang it at the right height from the Jeep. So I picked up these steel bungee cord hooks. They come in a 10-pack. These are from Master. I found them at True Value. And I also picked up some of this rubber foam King's weather stripping. And it's got the adhesive on the back. And that's what we're going to put on the back side of this. There we go, that's on. Simple enough. The next thing I'm going to do is drill a hole in each corner, about 1 inch in from each edge. And it's going to depend on the thickness of the paracord that you use. But this is 1/8 inch paracord that I've got, and I believe I use a 7/16 drill bit. gonna add some tape to the bottom. I kind of forgot to do that. And that'll just help so it doesn't put some of the tear out on the bottom edge. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is cut my pieces to length. I have to go back and look at my notes. I got to decide first whether I want it to hang from the gutters on the top, or if I want to hang it along the back, the rail on the back of the bed. And there's going to be a different angle for that. So I'm going to go look at my notes and I'll be back. Okay, I'm ready to tie these up and get them, put the hardware on and get it set. So I'll show you this, but on my bench I've got marked out every 2 inches. And I've decided I'm going to put this on the bed side. So in order to do that, the short side you cut 2 at 10 inches, and then the long side you cut 2 at 15 inches. And that gives me a little bit of room to play, to tie and retie the knot to get it to level out. Also, these that you buy, they come in various lengths. You can see these are smaller than the original ones I use. So there's like 1.25 inch difference there. So that does kind of come into play. But the nice thing is you can kind of adjust it as you go. As long as you cut it long enough, you can always make it shorter and then cut it off at the end. So basically, if you look at my bench here, these circle marks is what I've got marked for the short ones, or the ones that go on the side of the bench, and then the longer ones, if you want to do the ones that hang from the gutters, you cut one start at 23 inches and the long side then is at 25 inches and adjust it accordingly. Okay, I played around with the knots and got it tied properly and at the right height. You can see on the bottom here, you just tie a knot that doesn't go through the hole, and you try to do on both sides so that you leave about the same amount out, but you can obviously adjust the knot, loosen it, and move it up and down as needed to be on both sides. That way you can get it to be level. And on the inside here, obviously just hook under the rail. And that's it. I usually use them for cutting and prep and setting a drink on and coffee pot, whatever. One thing I don't do is I don't cook with it here on a stove. I mean, I suppose if you had jet boil or something, you could. Just a little too close to the paint, I wouldn't want to bubble my paint. So I usually do any cooking on the tailgate in the back. But I hope you found this video interesting and helpful. I hope you have the opportunity to make a couple for yourself. And again, thanks for watching.